desert at night. You'll rarely see me in the light. And don't you be so surprised if you don't see me at all. You're not the last of I'll see tonight. Do you hear me anyway? Or are you still focused on the day? Sometimes it's easy to overlook the storm shadow closing in on you tonight. Running high, and what's the point? When did death ever disappoint? It's like a hammer to the joint. If you don't spark it at all, maybe your first blow will not be your last. And do you hear me anyway? Are you still focused on the day? Sometimes your nightmare comes to play. Sometimes it's easy to overlook the storm shadow closing in on you tonight. I roam the desert of light. Sometimes you'll see me out at night. But don't you be so surprised if you don't see me at all. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel where I basically answer the questions that I'm presented with, and more often than not I try to answer the questions in a public format so that the conversation can be heard as if we were adhering to the values of inclusivity. So today itself I received a message from an unknown number in the format of text, and the text message apologized that that they had not been, the message of the sender was that they were apologizing that they had not been in touch for some period of time and that their number had changed, and they wanted to inquire as to how a third party was doing and how things are going. And at this point in time, if you followed this channel in any manner, you understand that I've had some extreme obstacles when it comes to having a conversation with a direct relative of mine. If I had this capability to talk with that direct relative, I would be saying that today itself, February the 25th, almost lost a month there, February the 25th of 2023, I ran my first 4K, 5K. I'm thinking of numbers, and when I try to think of numbers at the same time, sometimes the data gets a little bit crossed up. Some people call that dyslexia, some people call it ADD, some people call it all kinds of things. I tend to call it the spirit of error. I make errors just like anyone else. We're all human, and we're all thinking about things in a multitude of directions. But today itself, I was asked how I'm doing, and so again, I'm answering this in public. And when I started this video, I started it out with an icebreaker where I played a song, and the song is called Stormshadow, and it goes with the guitar picks that I made recently, or that I had made recently. And these items are something that goes with the tools that I put together to create what I create, which in some cases is music, and sometimes I'll talk about the spelling aspect of it. Like for an example, when I said that this concept was talking about things which might include words like warlock and energy vampire, laws of attraction and whatnot. But today itself, I started out this response with a song called Stormshadow. Stormshadow, made a guitar pick, made a song that goes with it. Basically, in advance, I tried to answer the question of how I'm doing and how this third party is doing and how all kinds of other indirect conversation is going. When it comes down to it, the people reaching out to me are trying to communicate with me. And when I try to communicate with somebody, I like to communicate about something that has to do with our relationship, not with how someone else is doing or what someone else is doing. In general, I try to cover it, try to compress it down to one conversation. And when you ask how I'm doing, and when you specifically ask about how this other person is doing, as I'm telling you, I have no ability to talk with this other person because they refuse to carry on a conversation with me. When I say that, and when I say that you specifically are someone that I asked for help, that I asked to help me out with this situation, and you specifically did everything to forget that this question was ever asked of you, and you specifically caused me to sit down and think of how I was going to answer the question, how am I doing? Well, again, today's February, what day was it? 25th. I ran my first 5K non-stop. That's continuously running. And it took, I believe it said something like 38 minutes. But in reality, by my measurements, I think it was closer to 42 minutes. It's really unusual, some of the data that I got after the software update on this device that I have. I won't go into details about this device other than to say it has absolutely been a game changer for me to help me to almost have my own personal trainer right at my fingertips without having to interact with someone who might not ever hear the answer to my question, such as when they ask me, How are you doing? So let me ask you, how are you doing? I would love for you to click on the comments area and type some information about how you're doing. And in place of how I'm doing, which is, and warlocks, and time vampires, and energy vampires, and I'm pointing at myself at the same time to recognize it takes one to know one. If you were in need of assistance, if you were in need of counseling, if you are in need of either of those things, click on the comments, enter some information. Don't worry about asking me how I'm doing. I am powering through this era in time when I recognize around me the decline in all of the wildlife and the amassing of all of the trash throughout our environments, all of our environments. When I go for a walk in my own closed network, in my own closed neighborhood, it's nonstop straw wrappers, plastic bottles, and all variety of trash. A lot of it including the things that we've been told that we need to adhere to, like masks. There are masks all over this neighborhood. And I can say for a fact that the same thing is happening in our national parks. So as Mother Nature comes into our scope of awareness, this song, did you hear that? I hope to God this sound is something that you can hear. There was a hawk crying out. As Mother Nature calls out and shows us the things that we are damaging in our lives, and as we recognize other damage around us, I'm pointing in the direction of this third-party conversation that you're asking about. As these conversations continue to go nowhere, I continue to move forward. And it's challenging. It's challenging to have somebody who will communicate with you. I know that. And so for that reason, I also know that there are people subscribing here because they understand that what I'm saying is it's not very different from what all of the chosen ones and messengers and whatever religion you want to coin are saying. And not all of it's wrong. The part that seems a bit off is when we talk about, well, we should just not talk, not even attempt to talk with this other person. Well, here's my attempt to have a conversation with the person that I've had difficulties communicating with. It's right here in public. It's right here for all of my aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, and family members to see. And it's right here because, well, where else can I tell a story about myself if not on a specific platform called YouTube? I'm talking about my situation here. How am I doing? Well, let me tell you how I'm doing. I've written a whole catalog of content that ties back to a hierarchy of topics. Whether I'm able to have a pleasant conversation with somebody, and how do you define pleasant conversation, by the way? Is a pleasant conversation someone fabricating how they feel so that they can make it through a time frame with you? Is that how you approach conversation? And you know what I mean. Those who are listening to this channel understand and overstand, and they know about the cat down the road, and everybody seems 100% able to overlook the gravity of the situation. And I don't mean, the gravity like the Earth's gravity. I mean the gravity, the sustenance, the weight. For some of us, we can't even begin to think about doing without going through adversity, pain, rejection. And then you start talking about the season we're in right now, the season of Lent in this country, a season when we're supposed to think about topics of peace while there's all that garbage strewn about the neighborhood, the hawks crying out in the residential areas, looking for food that's no longer there in the nearby wilderness parks. We talk about these conversations on this channel. And by we talk about, what I mean is I present an idea that might put into perspective the amount of time that each of us has to answer any question with one another. The only tricky part is choosing with whom to engage in conversation, because not everybody will reciprocate the level of awareness and consideration for their fellow human beings, let alone their fellow animals. So I wrote this song called Stormshadow, and Stormshadow references a character that I learned about during my childhood when I was growing up. The toys called G.I. Joe, the cartoon called G.I. Joe, was one of the most amazing cartoons that I ever had seen. I looked forward to Saturdays so I could watch that cartoon. And oftentimes I was able to. For a period of time, I even had the little action figures. Having the action figures was something that brought me joy as a child, even though they were made out of plastic. And because those items brought me joy, I paid those items a good amount of care. Now, I also grew up in a different income bracket than many of the friends that I went to school with. And so I coveted all of the things that they were able to get during those holidays when we typically would exchange gifts. And at certain points in time, I learned that you could get certain things without putting in the same currency. You could get discounts. I've done a lot of things that I can see as shameful because I value integrity. And because I value integrity, I can see the shame of associating with thieves. It takes one to know one. We all know at some level what level of sin that we participate in. We all know, and we can all see it in one another, because nobody is perfect, right? Except for the bringer of peace who talked about all of these topics. And even if they were perfect or imperfect, they still delivered the perfect message at the perfect time. On this channel, which is dedicated to wellness and conservation, I try to show the journey of how nurturing of self leads to nurturing of surroundings. And I've shown so far how participating in the system in the old way leads to a gigantic absorption of energy, positive and negative, and how we use it in return is what drives what happens in our own earthbound garden, over which we are stewards. And because we're stewards of these things, and because nature has our back, if we have nature's back, we bring together a fuller picture in the form of music, imagery, a combination of that, and emotion. Some places will exclude emotion. They'll dance around the topic. I'm not dancing around anything right now. Maybe that's why it took so long to get to 300 subscribers. Maybe because I talk with my family and friends right here and try to show conversations and how that develops right here. Because I try to show a success story, and because I will not forget the details of the past, no matter what phone number the message came from that was asking again for something that I cannot provide without your assistance. Because of that, I wrote a song called Stormshadow. And it tells you, it starts out, and do you hear me anyway? Or are you still focused on the day? Sometimes your nightmare comes to play. Sometimes it's easy to overlook the storm shadow closing in on you tonight. The storm shadow speaks about Mother Nature. It speaks about a character from the Hasbro line known as Stormshadow. It comes across as the Cobra Ninja. The Cobra Ninja oftentimes would team up with the G.I. Joe equivalent, Snake Eyes. And quite often there was honor among ninjas, honor among thieves, honor among us. And because I recognized that we had a shortage when it came to having a complete conversation, I decided to focus on myself. And the inward journey is the darkest journey of them all. Once you start looking inward, once you look at yourself in the mirror, once you recognize all that judgment, once you see the hostility and pointing out that plastic over and over, once you see it, you can't unsee it, and so you can only learn. Someone recently posted something on one of my pages asking me, not even asking me, telling me, well, in these cases, it looks like anyone could consider themselves a narcissist. Think about that. That's what I'm saying. It takes one to know one. So for everyone trying to drill in a hateful energy, I can hear the hawk outside again. For anyone trying to sabotage the situation, well, all I've got to say is that with the right tools and persistence, with the right observations, and maybe even with the right spelling, we will learn to communicate in a more fruitful manner. Which reminds me, the fig tree that was hated on so greatly in my last segments by the person who had an outburst, well, it died. And so I planted a new fig tree. This one, I'll call it a 4-core fig tree because it has 4 tremendous stalks at the bottom versus just the one. And so what that means is it's multi-headed. I'm talking about these in almost server-like, by what server I mean computer-like terms, because if we are living in a simulation, well, all we need to do is put in the programming that has to do with the rate of success that we wish to achieve. And for me, what I wish to achieve is to be able to answer, how is this other person doing? Oh, I'd love to answer that for you. But it might take you talking to the cat down the road, with or without me, because they seem to be in trouble. And when I talk with that person, they physically have assaulted me, punching me. And if you don't understand that I personally do not want to put myself alone with that person because they are a threat, then you may also not understand this upcoming reference where I say, please, by this point in time, if you're still watching, smash that like button. Share that video. I may not be anything other than funny, sarcastic, and genuinely arrogant in the eyes of the observer. I've had many people call me things, including sarcastic, and that's why they ended their side of our friendship. I've had people who helped me to grow some plants that are just hanging on, not knowing. The plants are not knowing whether they should go on or not. And all I can do is try to nurse them through their difficult times and provide hope. The hope is not in this capacity. It's certainly not on this screen that you're looking at. The hope is not talking into a camera. The hope is for someone to receive a message that brings them joy. So some of the things that bring me joy include music. Music, nature, for sure wildlife. All the wildlife and nature fascinates me. For my whole life it's fascinated me, which is why this channel is dedicated to wellness and conservation. So if you're watching this channel again, all I can say is I'm answering people's questions. I'm tying together all of the work into one neat package that is truly friendly packaging, because you don't have to unwrap anything. There's nothing that came in the mail for it. There's no constant magazine stapled together that tells us about all the tireless work that's being done in the interest of conservation as we monthly throw away hundreds of thousands of brochures and pamphlets. There's nothing in that future of destruction and carelessness that leaves us a whole lot of time to talk about the weather. And so that's why I wrote a song. That's why I'm telling these stories. That's why I'm answering your questions. That's why it's taken so long to send the thank you cards. That's why I haven't even opened some of my things that I received from the last holiday season. I haven't. Because every day, no matter how much effort I'm putting in, there's also someone else wanting to talk about something. Something that has nothing to do with whatever the conversation is that's being asked of me. And so as I talk with people of that caliber, we get to certain points where we literally wind up praying in the desert together, seeing the windstorm come to us and wash over us, taking our words of prayer with the seriousness, with the weight, as if it were important. And then we see one another when we talk with them. We can answer how we're doing that day. And the person may not ever have heard a single thing that you ever said. So for those of you out there who think that no one's listening, again, click on the comments. Type something in there. I know I'll respond. I'm not saying that you need to respond or even type anything in there. I probably can hear your thoughts the same way that you can hear mine. I probably have the same type of dreams that you have. Probably think the same things that you think. One of the biggest differences, even though I drink the same things that you drink, I don't seem to be wanting revenge all the time. That was the childish way to approach life. That was the sinner's way. We're all sinners. The difference is, can we even recognize it? Can we recognize when the spirit of error is so great that we can't even hear the person talking with us? Because all we hear is the nonstop chatter that says, I've got to see who wrote me. I've got to know what's going on. I've got to talk to so-and-so. Forgot to do this. I forgot to pay that. I forgot, all right? I learned it from watching you, Dad. Does anyone remember that commercial? Anyway, all of these things are a multi-threaded conversation that's not threatening. It's a conversation. I'm putting it here, not out of disrespect, not out of disregard. I'm putting it here because, well, if I'm going to talk for that long, I might as well talk with someone who cares to listen. So if you cared to listen and you understood, all of this message applies to the struggle is real. Every one of us is going through a struggle. Whether we can help one another is a whole other situation. One time, here just to end the story on something, I don't even know if I'll remember the words to this song. I had such horrible physical pains over the last few weeks and months. There were some days when I spent 14 hours in bed with shooting pain in my head that was just unbelievable, causing nausea, vomiting. And one of the things every so often before that period of time that I had a conversation with people about was this song, this concept of spiritual devil. A song that came from my friend's dream. My friend, I've seen share that this topic of their dream led to an actual song. I've seen them talk with a multitude of their own family and friends. And there goes the hawk. I hope you can hear that. So this person talked with a multitude of people about a dream of a deceased relative telling this person that they needed to relay some insight to me. And the concept was that if you did something as if you were a spiritual devil, that's the only way that you would be able to relate. So, I'm going to try to play this song, and I'm going to tell you that someone who's listening to this right now helped me to come up with a way to remember the words to this song. I had written some lyrics into this song, but I had a hard time remembering it. That's why I'm saying I may or may not play it accurately. Just like when I played the first song that you'll hear on this video, if you listen to it, there was one verse where I forgot a line and I just kept going. You didn't know. I didn't know either. It just came that way. Came out that way. But anyway, it wasn't as I rehearsed it, in other words. And every once in a while, when we play things live, they don't come out the way we rehearsed them, because there may or may not be a recipient who needed to hear it a certain way. But anyway, somewhere in this group of people watching the video, there's somebody who talked about shedding our skins. And I told them this is relevant, and it's very relevant. It was relevant enough that I wrote it into a song that came from a dream that a friend of mine had. A friend of mine had this dream. My best friend had this dream. So I wrote a song, and they thought it was a really interesting concept. So somewhere in this group, there's someone listening to this who's going to go, I kind of remember that topic. We've had this conversation, you know. You may not fully remember it if it wasn't really fully important to you. It's important when I talk with you, and so I hope I get these words right. And I hope you've enjoyed what you've been watching. I hope you subscribe to the channel. I mean, it doesn't cost you anything, and if I have 1,000 subscribers, then this channel could be monetized, and that would allow me to basically receive a mediocre income to tell the story about what I'm seeing, the trash in the wild, and also to put my time into picking it up and getting paid for it instead of not getting paid for it. Just my thought, you know, whatever you feel, your will, be done, not mine. When I was a young man, I thought I would try. Now that I'm an old man, I've died on the inside. When they come to get me, I won't even hide. What's the point of living with no wrong or right? After I had died, I had shed all my sins. Wonder how much time till we shed all our old skins. Maybe when we see past each other's illusions, then we'll start to see we're each other's solutions. Spiritual devil we hear. The Lord is my salvation, so whom shall I fear? Maybe it's the way that I feel when you're near. Maybe it's the way that our ways disappear. Anyway, I know that it took a focused amount of time for you to hear this, those of you who listen to this from start to finish. And whether you heard all the words or not, I know that you put in some time to try and make an effort. So I want to thank you for your time. I want to tell you that I'm thinking positive thoughts in your direction. I hope that we're able to talk about that conversation that you would like to talk about. I hope that you can hear when I tell you that the person you're asking about has the same phone number that they had before. You're still welcome to call them. They live in your city. You should reach out to the cat down the road. I'm going to continue to try in a way that allows for the safety and well-being of all parties involved. And in order to accomplish this, somebody in the group, and it takes one to know one. I know who you are, you know who I am. Somebody in the group will need to participate just a little bit further. In the meantime, I ran my first 5K start to finish today. That was amazing. For anyone who doesn't know, 5K is 3.107 miles in terms of distance. And so as I told you, I ran for over 40 minutes straight. That requires focus, concentration, effort, integrity in order to do things for that long of a period of time. There's no way to skip a step to just start doing something like that. If you're not healthy, don't forget, health is wealth. You need to put in the same amount of time that maybe you spent formerly gossiping or following ritualistic holiday advice or visiting over and over without ever carrying that torch with you. So until our time runs out on this amazingly gorgeous planet, I'm going to have to call it out gently that I see when people throw things out the window. I've done it. I learned it from watching our fathers. And I hope that that makes sense and that you're able to process this in a loving way. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. Peace, love, and all that old school stuff.